And we are recording this session, so just so you are aware of that, and we will also be sending it out a little bit later.
Annette is in Pleasanton, California. Annette, we are neighbors. I just moved from Pleasanton a few years ago out to Brentwood, but hello, neighbor. And Phoenix and Austin.
Phoenix, yeah, Northern California. Oh, that's you. Northern California. Oh. Yeah.
I have to say Northern California because anytime I say Brentwood, people think I'm in the LA Brentwood. That was a very fancy area.
That is very fancy. I always remember Brentwood from the OJ trials.
Yeah.
And that's what most people know it from. I was like, no, I don't live there. Like,
that was the neighborhood I lived in Austin until 2 days ago, Brentwood. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
All around.
Cool.
Also, have you ever, okay, I could digress there, but I'm not going to digress because we've got people coming in, stick to task. Britta's joining us, based in Austin. Hello. I'd love for my brand's messaging on holistic editing and mentoring to feel warm, clear, and authentic.
Love it, Britta.
Clarity.
That's already clarity right there. Amazing. Brianna, I almost want to unmute you to understand how you say the town you're in.
I think it's Paulsbo. We were just there.
Paulsbo.
Paulsbo. Thank you.
I believe Norwegian roots. All right.
All right, let's introduce our crew. All right, we're going to get started. So hello, everyone. I'm Emily Sicorsi. I'm the co-founder of Root and River. And with me is my other co-founder.
Hi, Justin Foster.
And also with us is our incredible, amazing Chief of Staff, Kat Weiss. And we're all having the great fortune today to be joined by Misty Megia, who is just a sparkling light and full of knowledge and here to give her expertise and have this conversation around rethinking how we rethink brand and marketing for a new year, which it's coming. I swear this year will end at some point.
We'll get there.
I say that in hope and not in certainty, but hope is pretty powerful. And just so y'all know how this will go, we're really going to just have a conversation. As I was inviting people to today, I told them, you don't have to come with anything. This is just all going to be around these core ideas. We're going to share some questions with each other and try to answer them and explain the thinking behind the questions. So we'll be doing that in conversation. Justin, Misty, and I, and Kat is going to be hanging out and chat with you and collecting your comments and piping up and interrupting us when they come in. Key questions, comments, whether they're from you or from Kat, and clarifying things. And she's going to really help facilitate what's coming in from you. So we want this to be highly interactive. We did prepare a deck just so we could share ideas visually, because that's really important. But that in no way would limit our ability to converse with you. So please take advantage of the chat to reach out to us. Okay.
So we're gonna start off with a level set. So before, as part of the level set, we want to hear from you. So when you think about, and you should see the poll on your screen, when you think about marketing and branding planning, how do you feel? So pick an answer that is most like what you feel. My answer to this has changed. When I was a CMO, I dreaded it.
So that probably meant you avoided it, procrastinated.
Totally half-assed it.
Yeah, tried to do it in 1 hour.
Negotiate my way out of it. Like, well, it's the reason the deck is so short is because it's, like.
Tried to cancel the meeting, right, Kat? You tried to cancel the meeting.
Delegate.
There's nobody to delegate to. With CMO of startups,
Oh, yeah.
And
the marketing department.
Yeah, that's it. And so, and then, but I think back to Emily, your job when you were, VP of Corporate Communications, and Misty, where you were at when you were in the corporate world, how you felt about this. Like, which of these match you back then, back in those days, back in the old days?
I think it's hard to choose one. Like I would probably choose a couple of them. For me, I always was motivated to figure out what was the next big thing that would move the needle and help my company grow. But then there's that little bit of anxiety because it is throwing a dart at a dartboard that you cannot see. And so you kind of have this mix of like, I hope I'm choosing the right thing. I hope I'm investing me and my team's time in the right in the right spot. But mostly, like, because you're basing it on numbers, it's like, all right, I have a little bit of security in some of those decisions.
Cool.
For me, again, I agree with you, Misty. I kind of felt a mixture, but I think this is where I nerded out a little bit. So I kind of got all excited because I was like, ooh, and then I'm going to build this in, and this can slot in here. And it really appealed to the part of my brain that can really geek out on flow and systems and pull from things happening in the world. At first, when I first started doing it, and then I'll never forget the first one I put together, and it was gorgeous, and it was comprehensive, and it was like everything. And then we did like 2%. I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have spent 2 weeks of my time on that. And so it was a huge lesson. So motivated at first and perhaps a little humbled before or afterwards.
Great.
Humbled is other.
So thank you for everyone that responded. So the winner, they're still counting votes in Pennsylvania, but the winner here is overwhelmed. So that makes sense. Planning is, I think it was Eisenhower that said, a plan is useless, but planning is paramount. So I might be paraphrasing there. So what we want to give you today is a little bit different perspective about that, this different approach. So Em, are you going to pull up the deck?
Yeah,
okay.
Right here. The other quote I'm planning that we love is, I don't like the source, but it's a good quote. What is it, Justin? You always have a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah, it was Mike Tyson. Yeah. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Yeah.
That's some wisdom. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. Just so there's clarity too. There's the poll. There was some excitement as well. This is part of what we call being marketers. So this is a community that we started this year, and really just some specific content for those of you who are marketing and trying to balance being a being and being a marketer, and coming at things from a different perspective, shifting thinking, and offering support and advice along the way. So welcome. And as I mentioned, we have Misty with us, and you may happen to see this goat a couple times as we go. So just keep an eye out. So we talked about, and a couple of you shared one thing that you wanted to share with your brand, or share through your brand with the world this year. And that's a great kind of level set question for you to continue to think about. But before we kind of got into our questions, we want to do a level set. And the level set's around how we define brand. So brand is, in the Root and River definition, is how other people experience what you believe. So I assume that people on this webinar understand that it's not a logo, it's not a color, but it's rather an experience of your own personal rooted beliefs or values or convictions. And so this is really like a bridging idea, that brand is the conduit through which we convey almost our soul, our spirit, the things that motivate us to other people. And then how they experience it is also part of the brand. So we may have one intention for that, but then the way the audience experiences it is another aspect of the brand. And those sort of play together to create brand, which goes to our, at Root and River, general thinking that brand is not a thing you do or something you design, but is an everyday practice. And so as we think about the year ahead, the year to come, we're really centering on this idea of, how can we share what we believe with other people? And then how can we craft an experience and then remain open to how that experience evolves for them? Mm-hmm. And that's a level set there.
So those of you that know us at Root and River, and that Misty as well, is that we see the world quite a bit differently. It's almost like the inverse. Like we say that your message isn't what people want to hear. Your message is what your heart has to say to the world. We refer to what we do as intrinsic branding because it starts on the inside. Your audience isn't who you're looking for, it's who's looking for you. Stuff like that. It's almost like the inverse of traditional thinking in this area. So similar thing here with the type of planning and forecasting that we teach our clients and what we practice ourselves, which is a practice of inquiry. This idea that planning is really about having the right questions, not the right answers. Mm-hmm. And what this is reflective of is a lot of planning comes around a time when there wasn't, as the common phrase is, so much VUCA in the world of volatility, uncertainty, chaos. And I know it's ambiguity, but I like saying anarchy for the A. So there was a level of predictability. You think about this from a marketing standpoint, and I was thinking, again, this is kind of a question for Misty and Emily too, is what was predictable for you? When your role was, when you were doing planning, what you're like, okay, we can lock in. I think not to answer for you, but one that came to mind is like planning for your conference. Like you knew that was going to happen. Yeah. And now we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what 2021 is going to bear. This practice of inquiry has always probably been the best way to do things. This goes back to ancient teachings, Plato, Socrates, Buddha, Jesus. I mean, all of that is inquiry-based thinking about the future. But to Emily and Misty, what was predictable for you when you were doing marketing planning in your corporate life?
For me, that's a phenomenal question. Like, what was predictable? For me, because we often really focused highly on the people that we wanted to draw towards us, their behaviors over the years became predictable for us. But it did take us a while to find our rhythm in that and what would attract the right ones that were forward thinking, that wanted to move the needle, that wanted growth, that weren't afraid of new technology. So as we defined ourselves and what we wanted to bring to the world, the predictability of who we were going to draw was a little bit easier. And then we also discovered that our audience was really fun, which was not predictable for us in the beginning. We're like, oh, they love to have fun. These are accountants that, typically people see from the outside world as very like rigid and a checklist, which they are in that capacity. But they also are people that love to have costume parties and be wild and crazy. And so when we would go out and have shirts that say, hey, be a badass, those shirts went like that because they're like, I want to be a badass. I was like, oh, go you. So once we started fine tuning that audience, then it became predictable. But until we fine tuned that audience, it was, kind of this discovery and inquiry and continue to ask questions to uncover the right audience for sure.
For me, I think what was predictable was that I was going to be like measured on this. And that's something that I, as not a natural numbers person, avoid. Like I can create content plans and get into the crafting of the language and like the visuals. And I can not deal with the reality that I have a, leadership team that's like, okay, so where's the growth and what does it look like and how are you going to get there? So I think that was predictable and I had to deal with that. Whereas I might have avoided it because it didn't play to one of my strengths in the past. But once I confronted that and I like let myself be scared of it and then dig into the data and look at where we were today on our website traffic, on our social interaction, I could see once the plan started to be executed, I could see, I knew sort of where the levers were and what was, how that strength could affect weakness or the fear I had around being able to perform. But I think it's very predictable for any business that you have to measure what you're doing. And I learned this other beautiful aspect of data that like it can tell you what your audience, it can give you these great little clues to what your audience loves, like being silly, like Misty mentioned, that can be revealed in the way that they react to the content in the data if you're looking at the data regularly enough. So
yeah, I think in my times, in the 2-3 stints I had as a CMO, the common predictability that I had was lack of resources. I could not. So that's just where I developed my bias that advertising is the last thing you do, not the first thing you do. I'm not saying that's always true, but it was true for me because we had no money really so also each interaction was priceless. If we got someone on the phone, oh, how great is that? We got an email, we got to make that count.
Yeah.
And especially integrating the brand story into the customer experience. That's how the 3 different brands that I was the CMO of, that's how we built the brands, 1 to an exit, and then 2 that are still in business. And, where I went on to start Root and River with Emily. And I think that's an important thing to do, regardless if you're a solo entrepreneur, or maybe you run a marketing team for a larger company. Starting from a place of being lean, like start from a place of what's the least amount of money I could spend for the maximum output or maximum impact here. Mm-hmm. And if you do that as a leader, especially when everyone is extremely budget conscious now in all sizes of companies, if you can in marketing come in, and I'm smiling because I remember this conversation I had when I was the CMO of this media company, where I came in and had a conversation with the CEO, and I'm like, we need to cut our budget, our event budget by 50% because it's not going to work. I'd rather not spend it or spend it on something else. And he was incredulous because that was his pet idea to do that. And so it's that mindset, kind of scrappy or grassroots, like those are good. Word of mouth is good. That's what you want here. If you could build that into your plan, you're way ahead of everyone that's got these super rigid, predictable, in quotes, plans.
Mm-hmm. I love that, Justin. I so agree. There's, for me, like no matter what budget I had, whether it was 60,000 or 60 million, I always approached it as if it was my dollars and was super conservative and tried to figure out, okay, how can we do everything really scrappy, but excellent at that scrappy funness? And so I think that challenge, especially with social and all of the things that we have to reach our audience, that is a no cost barrier, is kind of really fun to play with and figure out all your analytics there and dive into the numbers and see what like people are reacting to and engaging with. So there's so many different ways to be scrappy and have some fun there for sure.
Mm-hmm. And you alluded to this a little bit, but I think the statement, good planning and forecasting begins with inquiry, really keeps us from knowing too much. Like, I think all of our stories have touched on the fact that like, we thought we knew this, but it was actually this, or we thought this was predictable, but then it turned out it was a different way. Yeah. So when we come to planning sometimes thinking, okay, I have all the controls and I know what's going to happen. But if you begin with inquiry, it opens up a lot more possibilities. Like, is our audience still this way? Like, what worked well for us last year? What did we love doing? Those sorts of questions, and the ones we're going to get into now. It just, that inquiry process kind of gets you out of knowing too much and gives you new options and new ideas.
Yeah, you're allowing the insights to lead you versus you taking control and just assuming that you know it all, right?
Yeah,
it's exactly. Like, okay, what don't I know? And it's fun to like uncover those discoveries because that's where your imagination can start growing.
Yeah. And I think it's this finding this moderation point in between over planning and effort. Like there's a moderation plan. Somebody asked me the other day, what are your plans for 2021? And I said, I got a 1-word strategic plan: surrender. Just, it's a kind of a spiritual idea of just let it come to me. And I understand in a business standpoint, that can't be your, 2021 branding plan, surrender. But there is an element of understanding that the unknown contains just as much possibility as the known, sometimes even more.
Mhm.
And if you're too rigid in your planning, you'll take away from the mystery. You'll take away from that spaciousness of the unknown that people that have rigid plans will not be able to adapt to.
Right. And you get to see what like as you're doing that trial and error and A/B testing, and you see like something works to move the needle, and you're like, ooh, another discovery. Let's double down there. Or oh, that didn't work at all. Let's not do that. Or maybe we adjust it and see when it works again.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we're going to offer up 7 questions for you. The first question, I'm going to pose this question to you, Justin, and then you can talk through it and the thinking behind it and answer it if you like. But in the coming year, what is your fixed point on the horizon for progress towards success? I don't like to think of success as a final thing, but what is your fixed point on the horizon for success?
Yeah. I think that, the fixed point on the horizon is, we borrowed that term. It's kind of a military term for like battle planning, commander's intent. And so I think, it's just some of the conversations you and I have had recently, Em, as we do our own inquiry-based planning for the new year, that the fixed point on the horizon still for me is to do work with people that we love that pays us well. And being selective about that. Like, we're not for everybody. That's okay. But the business still has to work. So we need to figure, so the fixed point on the horizon still for me is very like people centric. Like if we're sitting here a year from now and I got to do what we do with the 4 of with you and Jen and Kat, and we got paid, that's great. So I think that's probably my answer. What about you guys? What comes to mind for you in that?
Justin, I think for me, it is that bringing in the people that you want to work with and that just bring you so much joy.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. You are not for everyone, and that's good. Like, oh yeah, no, I do not gel with you. And I always do a 20-minute just discovery call. And I think it's an equal interview, just as, you're hiring somebody, it should be an equal interview. But that point is where you see whether you're the right fit and you can collaborate. I tend to be with the people that really understand my mission of helping women find their authentic voice, because I truly believe your speaking ability impacts your career trajectory. And so, yes, I have 2 men that squoze under the radar in my list, but majority of my women are those that are director and up, and just figuring out how to present to a broader audience and are excited about the growth, even though it totally paranoids them because of anxiety. They're like, I'm ready to dive in and learn this skill and grow. And you see their joy in everything that they accomplish. And that's what gives me the joy. I was like, oh, every time they go, Misty, I just did my first all hands meeting and it's a week later and I'm still getting comments about how great it was. I'm like, yes. So figuring out that ideal client that is not only going to bring me joy of working with them, but bring me joy at their successes is like, that's my fixed point.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I heard like finding my ideal client from you, Misty, and then Justin, I heard doing work we love with people we love.
Yeah, and getting paid well.
And getting paid.
Exactly.
Well.
They value it.
For me, I think it's for Root and River to be more widely known. Mine's a little bit more, I guess, I don't know, more whatever, but we've been flying a little under the radar, and it's not about us, although it sounds that way so far. It's about the ideas of intrinsic branding and telling the truth in the way that you put yourself out there in the world, and having that confidence that comes from running a mission-based business and then being able to share that very articulately with the world. Like, I want more people to know about that. I want more people to embrace that approach. And I want to help move those ideas forward. And the way that we do that is through Root and River. So I'm like, yeah. And I'm trying to even think more tangibly as I'm you know, in this planning process myself. Like, what does that look like? Like 2020, we were going to be on stage at South by, but that didn't happen. So, so it's interesting to like not be sure about those sorts of high profile opportunities, but still want that as the fixed point on the horizon. I think that's an interesting little curiosity that I would play with in the planning, or am playing with in that planning process.
And for those of you listening in or watching this later, this fixed point on the horizon is, it's not you're not attaching to this as some sort of outcome. It's not fantasy. But it is from the imagination. It's okay to be specific. It's okay to dream a little bit in this idea, because you need your imagination to do inquiry-based planning. Without imagination, it's just all data and tactics and calendars. So, and that's, you know, those are necessary, but they're not very
totally.
All right. Question 2. We got 6 more to go through here.
We have a response in the chat though. Would you like to hear?
Yeah.
Bringing calmness to my clients through walking the path of technology with them as a partner.
That's
nice.
Good.
Words.
Yes.
Calmness is such a good word.
I love that it's about a journey too.
And that says mine are similar to what has been discussed, working with ideal clients and getting paid well for the value I provide. And Crystal, I should have my glasses on. Finding the joy, she says.
Yes. I want to do this to all of those.
Well done. Thank you, Kat.
Emily, for you, I would love to know, what intention will you hold during this process?
I love that question so much. So I practice yoga, and you know, during yoga, or before you start off, and you'll set an intention for your practice. There's an idea you want to return to. And I think that's a very relevant idea in business and marketing and branding is, you know, what do I want to hold? What do I want to hold inside me? And then hold as a standard for myself. Now that may trigger like, oh, like I gotta perform, but that's not how I intended. I mean, I think one of the responses said, I want to have joy. So to me, that's almost like getting it to intention, like having joy throughout the process of us getting to have a higher level of prominence. That would be sort of the intention to me is like an emotion I want to feel or a hope I want to send out to the world. And it's something that I can like usurp my own tendency to like steal my own joy or like make it hard work in my mind. Or, you know, an intention could also be like to remain grounded and even keeled. I have a lot of emotional amplitudes, but being grounded is where I do my best work. So that can help. To me, Misty, it's like a ballast point. It's like something that roots you and grounds you, even though you're trying to plan and envision all these big things. Does that make sense?
You say roots you, huh?
Yeah.
I love your branding.
What about for you guys, Justin?
That 100% makes sense, because finding that one word that just can ground you when you're planning and going back and going to that intention as you are dreaming. Is this meeting that intention that I'm starting with? Is this meeting my intention for the year? And it's like that, you know, that bubble that you just, the mind map.
Yeah.
Everything map back to my intention.
Yeah. So that's a good setup for, I think, the question I want to ask you, Misty. I think it's our third question, which is this what we call, or you call, a meaning map. So the question is, how will I have contributed to the world this year? Or if I'm asking you, how will you have contributed to the world in 2021? When you're thinking about your planning for your business, where does that come in, that map of meaning?
Yeah, for me, I'm gonna put a word into chat.
Strong her. Nice.
That's my word. I just really want to help women elevate and believe in their strength and their inner voice. If I do that, I feel blessed to be a part of that journey for them. So the fact that a lot of women, when I reach out, we did a call for papers for speakers, and we got 400 submissions, and 30 were women and 2 were people of color. And every time I reached out to women, they said, oh, I'm not an expert in that, or I don't know enough. And I have to keep saying, you're helping the person that's 4 steps behind you, not the one that's 10 steps ahead of you. And you absolutely can do this. And so really helping them find that inner voice, like to get them to be stronger, it's just like, got it. Just finding that inner strength that they do have the capacity to step forward.
And speaking for all men, how about that? Is when I hear that, and it's a reminder I have, because I get asked this a lot by more enlightened men, which is, how do they support women? How do you do this? And so my message to men, and if you pass it on to the men in your lives, is our job moving forward for the foreseeable long future is to be an ally. And so whatever your strengths are, whatever platforms you have, whatever your thing is that you've worked hard to build, use that. This is like I talk about privilege. If you do have privilege, we can acknowledge that, but then use it for good. Use it as a platform. And so that's how I think that's how men, enlightened men, can contribute to this new age of femininity and feminine energy, and all that's that's emerging out of the last few years.
100% with partnership, right? Always with partnership.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Collaboration, partnership, allyship. Yeah. I think when I think about our brand, Root and River brand, I love this question because it really allows us to think about what we want to give and takes us out of that offering mindset, which is a fine mindset. There's not a criticism there, but it takes us away from that and gives us an opportunity to go, okay, what do I want to contribute? What do we as a brand want to contribute to the world? And sometimes that's through a paid offering. Sometimes that's not. Sometimes that's like, okay, what as a brand, what kind of brand activism do we want to engage in? What are we giving away for free? And if we have been giving away X for free, maybe it's time to switch to Y. And it gives us a chance to tune in to the audience anew and think about, what do I want to contribute to their lives? And then that, obviously will have a snowball effect to the greater world.
You bring up a really good point there. That's kind of almost like a neuro programming of marketers, which is nobody buys your business model or your product line. They really don't. That's a myth or that's an illusion that marketers have all agreed to. What they're buying is the way it makes them feel. And to me, you can divide your audience into, it's on a spectrum between unconscious and conscious. And if your audience is on the other end, on the consciousness end of the scale, they're not buying your whatever you do, whatever you're selling because of what it is. They're buying it because it's either from you, they trust you, they feel a connection to it. And there's this neuro coupling, energetic trust, whatever you want to call it, that if you are in the product marketing business, if you think you are selling a product, that gets missed. The other way we like to say this is you want to market to the core self, not the surface self. Like get down into where their curiosity is and their spirit and their soul. Well, when you are sharing what you're contributing to the world as a brand, you are inviting them to go, hey, would you like to support us in this? I think of this Austin-based company, Clean, where very clearly 50% of their profits go to support addiction recovery. I choose this because it's Austin-based and because of this. I did not choose it because it's yerba mate and it was, $2 for $5. It was because of what it represents.
Kat, do we have any responses from our audience on this?
We do. We have quite a few responses. Let's see. Helping writers and authors to elevate their work for submission to agents or indie self-publishing. A lot of this is illuminating where their voice is pitch perfect and places where it still needs work, and strategizing together on how to get where they want to be. That's from Britta. And then Annette says, serving and supporting my clients so they can in turn have bigger impacts on the world through their business. And Stephanie says, by the end of this year, we will have helped several women-owned businesses to scale and grow and become even more successful. And Nicole says, as I grow my business, I will use the funds to plant trees.
Yay!
Sounds like she needs to partner with Root and River.
And Crystal says, be a light and help the hopeless. And Susan says, breaking cycles through storytelling. All amazing answers.
Let's do it. I'm ready to go. Let's do all those things.
What incredible people on the call. You guys are
so
world changing. I love it.
Okay, so next question. This is all about you, Misty. So talk to us about customers. So I love this question. It was something that we talked through a lot on the prep call. How will my customer know I exist this year? So talk to me about this question and what it means to you.
Yeah, for me, I always, part of my business planning, I took a week off a month ago and started my business planning. And it was just the vision part of the planning of just dreaming big. And then I boil down into the financial side and my KPIs and all those lovely things. But I always start with the customer journey to figure out where do I have opportunities for growth. And the first thing is awareness. How do your clients even know that you exist out there? So this part of the puzzle is always, to me, the most fun as new businesses or even seasoned businesses. How do your clients that you want to bring to you, like, who the heck is Misty Megia? And so I end up like looking at people that have like-minded audiences that I want to draw in and figuring out how to have some sort of third-party connection with them, whether it's me writing on their blog articles, me presenting with them, or whatever it is. But it's helping you connect to those right people out there that can bring awareness, and you can bring awareness of them from your audience. So it's definitely a symbiotic relationship where you're doing some cross marketing. But that's always my first step in the journey of like, how do they know I exist? The prospects and clients that I want to draw to me. And once you dig in that, there's so many opportunities for growth just in that one step of the journey. And there's 7 steps in the customer journey. So as you dig along and it's evaluate and consume and all of those other pieces, you can find areas for growth in each one of those. But if you start with the awareness side, that at least will start your top of funnel going.
That's awesome. I love it too, because if you really ask yourself that question, how will my customers know I exist? It's like, well, how did they know I existed this year? And then again, it gives you the opportunity to audit what you've done and see, oh, they all came from this one group I'm a part of that has kind of nothing to do with my business or whatever it is. And you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should do more of that. Or, you can kind of go to another level. And then also just, I think it's a great grounding question. People come to us for help with brand a lot. And this is a core question they should be asking themselves, but they kind of, sometimes people have this idea like, yeah, I'll have the perfect language and that'll be enough. And it's not really enough. Like, you have to get into the mind of the customer and get practical about popping up on their radar.
Yeah, they don't even know to Google you, right? They have no idea that you offer phenomenal branding solutions and a completely different approach to branding. And so how can you go outside of your circle of influence and reach out to those third parties that you can partner with?
Yeah.
And I think that if you're in professional services in particular, I think this probably applies to, other industries, but professional services, your customers, you need to be the face of your own brand, even if you represent a larger organization. So, this is where you start to hear like kind of buzzwords like thought leadership or subject matter expertise, but they matter. And so there's an old saying that kind of adopted a written river that I used to say years ago, I still believe this, which is when people say, well, we're the best kept secret. My response to them is always, well, that just means you suck at marketing. Like that's not a good thing. That's not something to celebrate. Look how secret we are. And a lot of that is sort of born in humility. Like, I don't want to stand out too much, or what if people don't like me? And, believe you me, I understand the ramifications of rejection, but the market, I've said this many times, if the market's going to reject you, at least make them reject who you really are, not who you're pretending to be, not what you're afraid of. Show them who you are. And if they reject you, there's always a plan B. But if you're operating, you're planning and your brand from a defensive posture, nothing good happens. Nothing good happens from a defensive posture.
Mm-hmm.
Any comments on that one, Kat, that we can address?
Mariette, I hope I'm saying that right. I share through newsletters, social media, and I'm not sure this part. Heavily void my COI.
Circle of influence.
Oh,
Hi,
okay.
Mariette. Mariette, my question for you. So I saw that you put that, the newsletters, and that's how you grow. That would be your base, right? So my challenge to you is, how do you even let them know that your newsletter exists? Like, who are you partnering with outside of your current circle to bring those people into your circle? And so I know you have an answer for that because you and I present together. So, but put it in the chat.
Yeah. Good question.
Mm-hmm. And Brenda says, forming relationships is the most fruitful for me because writing is such a personal experience. Prior to COVID-19, that was through conferences and events. Now it's through my newsletter, meetings, being a panelist at conferences, and through my own books.
There you go.
Yeah.
Love it.
Awesome.
And Susan says, Britta, yes, forming relationships.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. El número 5.
Cinco.
Cinco. I probably said that more Italian.
You don't want to hear my Spanish.
All right. Next.
As you're planning, Justin, I would love to know your process of what will get in your way of arriving at your fixed point this year. Like, what do you need to move out of your way in order to get there?
Yeah. So I think it's a two-part. I think there's internal and external. And internally, let's assume that you're working within a team, but you can apply these internal questions to you personally as well. Is what will get in your way internally is fuzziness or ambiguity, squishiness about your message. If you don't know what to say, it becomes a natural restrictor on the viscosity of sharing something, because you're like, oh, I got to write another newsletter, but I don't know what my message is. And so having that conviction and not having that conviction will definitely get in your way. I think externally, I think the thing that gets in the way is the assumption that we know what who our clients are and what they want. I think that we make the assumption, oh, they bought from me, and so that's this type of thing. And then there's all kinds of stuff like personas and target audience and all this stuff that doesn't really frame who your audience is. And so I think that an element of planning, marketing, and branding is going out and talking to your customers and finding out where they're at, what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. Because that assumption that you might know them, that could definitely get in your way.
Yes. I know the two questions that I love that I always try to ask are, what are your goals for the next 12 months? Granted, with COVID, you never know. But the second one is, what are you struggling with? And what do you think your obstacles will be to reach those goals? And if there's something in there that I can help with, then great. If not, then maybe I can channel them to somebody else that I know. But it's always really insightful to understand where their hurdles are in meeting those goals.
Mm-hmm. I always want to answer this question with me. I will get in my way of arriving at my fixed point this year. So I think this is a great question for some like honesty with the self. So with the self and going, okay, you got this plan. It's where you want to go, but how will you likely your patterns and your racket and your usual stuff that you're always working on, but it will always come up, right? And it will always get in my way. So I try to incrementally improve on the things that I'm maybe not as strong at, like blocking my time, getting ahead of things, not getting behind. So I think this is a good opportunity to sort of just do an internal inventory of the one thing you have the most control over, which is you, and just trying to plan around yourself a little bit, and give yourself room to be you. So maybe instead of doing those 10 things I want to do, I'm gonna put it down to 3, because I know realistically that's more. My ego wants to do 10, but Emily in real life can probably only get 3 accomplished with a ton of help and support.
And that comes with being that creative visionary, because you're just like, oh, we could do this. And it's like all the sparkly things that you like would love to do. But then you're like, okay, how do we narrow that down? But the thing is, Emily, when you say like, I think all of us get in our own way, but it's understanding like what you just said about it is my time that I need to figure out. Like, so you're not just having this broad, like, oh, it's me and that's just who I am.
No,
it's like, okay.
Honestly, digging into that and going, I don't always manage my time very well. I also don't leave myself room. One thing I learned last year is like, I have to leave myself room to do creative things. So I've tried to get better at like blocking time to create drawings like I did, you know, for this presentation, you know, preparing to be on a panel. Before I just sort of like roll in, and like I got better about that. So I'm still gonna get in my way. That's just how it's gonna go. But like making actual plans for how you can work around yourself.
Yeah, like knowing your habits ahead of time and being really cognizant of those and going, ooh, I'm slipping into my habit right here. I'm not holding myself accountable for what I did. So you have to have that list next to you of like, okay, when I recognize this habit, here's what I'm going to do to overcome that habit. And that process for me was something that I went through a program last year. It was like Awakening or something, but really figuring out what those habits were that I was getting in my own way of like wanting to start my own business and taking that leap was such a good process. So now that I know my habits, my not so good habits, I have how I can counteract those behaviors to make sure I'm moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think again, if you're on a team, if you're leading a team in marketing, and this is you want to make sure that you organize around your strengths. You can delegate a lot of weaknesses. So if your team's strength is with you crank out the best content, do that and delegate the rest. If you have the best like funnels for, you know, drip campaigns and things, do that. I think that's another element of, don't assume that you have to power through a weakness in order to be effective. It actually will deplete you more than just focusing on your strengths.
Totally. Such a great point, Justin. Yeah. Very, very good point. Any quick comments on that from the chat?
We do have a few. Annette says mindset, lack of focus, and lack of planning will get in the way for me. Let's see. Lack of a plan. Nicole said that. And then Mariette answered your question, Mindy. She says, it's really an intentional process for me, even though to some this may sound emotional and not typically professional, but I start very simply just by connecting with people that bring me joy and share my values. It's very quick to trust your gut if you're surrounding yourself with the people that light you up and that you're willing to even share what you're doing with them. Then if I like them and they like me, then I start sharing with them deeper about what I am about. But most importantly, I want them to know I care about what they are about.
Yes. I think that's very true of you, Mariette.
Then Susan says, definitely me. I can relate to what Emily is saying. Setting boundaries for myself is something I'm constantly working on. I'm at my best when I set boundaries for time to think deeply and go inward. Being creative is challenging when you're slammed in back-to-back meetings. And what Justin is saying is spot on. Strengths, focus on strengths. I'm so there right now as I search for my next opportunity. Awesome. And Crystal says, buried in work that I should be handing off to my employees. And Teresa says, too many services, less is better.
Yes. Ooh, that's an awesome segue. Misty can do that much better than me. I can try. So this is the question. What can you remove?
Everything. I'm just kidding.
Not doing anything. But this is this idea of simplification and pruning. So what do you think, Misty?
Absolutely. The one that said, Teresa, who says too many services, less is better. 100%. Like one of the things that in the corporate environment for the last many years that I've been in, my most recent position, I was ahead of 26 different countries, right? So managing a lot of different strategies for different countries and different entities can be completely overwhelming, but we always did 3 buckets, no matter what company I was at. And it was just like, okay, I'm making this up, but one is we want to build our community. That's one goal for the year. The next one is we want to build partnerships, third-party partnerships. That's a goal. We want to get more people trained in our solution. So it was just 3 goals. Mm-hmm. Like there's a magic number in 3. There just is. I don't know why. Comedy is in 3s. A lot of things that are good come in 3s. But the having just 3 set goals that your team focuses on for the year. And then of course, under that, you have your minor goals to focus on to help reach those 3 buckets, but just narrowing it down adds complete clarity for your team or for yourself. Okay, these are the 3 areas. And then everything that comes in at you of like, hey, can you do this? And can you do this? Does it fit my 3 buckets? This is how I decide what I'm going to do, yes or no, for this year. Does it help me achieve one of these 3 goals? And then you just kind of be flexible though too, because like this year obviously has been a really fascinating year to grow in different directions for everyone. So being able to pivot, and I'm sorry, I know that word has been used a million times this year, but being able to be flexible and agile in your plan is also key of like, okay, we might need to pivot how we get there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pivot on those big goals.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. What about you, Just? What are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, it goes back to what I said earlier, is I think it's important to remove everything and then add back in. Like, you know, like it's, you know, in government, you know, funding, it's referred to as a zero-sum budget. And I think it's this, and what that does is it encourages innovation and creativity, as opposed to, oh, last year we spent 20 million, this year we're going to spend 21.2 million or whatever. And so I think it's get rid of it all and then add back the stuff that matches the brand voice, matches the vision, where you're taking someone, where you're taking your brand. And B it's often attributed to Stephen King because he said it in his memoir, but kill your darlings. The stuff that you love the most could be the thing that you're going to have to get rid of, and that your attachment to it is affecting your thinking about it. So I had this conversation with the head of marketing for a nonprofit a number of years ago, and they had this print newsletter, and it was her, like, she loved getting that thing out every month. And she had, you know, this is a big nonprofit, and that was her, like, her thing. And I was like, you don't think you could switch to email? And, you know, that's an example of that idea.
Right. And can I just address Susan in the chat too? She says she's been in the position where she can't remove anything from her plate. It sounds like her boss. And can I just tell you, I've so been there. And I started to get into the habit of saying, yes, I would love to do that with you. What do I deprioritize on my list? Yes. Because it is an exchange of your time. And they need to understand that, like, I want to support this venture 100%, but my bandwidth is only so much. Yep. And there has to be trade-offs. It can't be a continue, yes, I'll take that on. Yes, I'll take that on, because you as an exhausted employee is of no benefit to the company either. And they need to understand that, like, you may be Superwoman, and I'm sure you are, but let's also give yourself room to breathe and grow and have those moments of creativity and clarity of goal.
Yeah, right. And saying, do you want me to be minimally effective at these 10 things or super effective at these 3 buckets? And let's set them together. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. We could talk about this forever. But we have one more question that we want to pose.
And so this question is for, I think, Misty, would like to hear from you on this one as we kind of move into the next steps and of what people can go do with this. Yeah. Is how will I know it worked? Like, what's the evidence? Like, okay, I had this plan, and now it's, you know, it's June. What am I looking for to see if it's working?
Yeah, your metrics are absolutely your friend in this area. And I used to, like, I have created dashboards for every company I've been at because I love the numbers. I'm super geeky about them and I like seeing the needle move. So when we were trying to decrease adoption of product, and at first it was 90 days out, we built a dashboard where we would do marketing, and our goal was to get that down, to 60 days. But then we started looking at it every morning and we're like, ooh, we're almost to like 50 days. And then, ooh, we're to 30 days. And it just becomes this source of celebration because you can physically see your team meeting the goals. And so even though you start with this really broad vision of what you want to do, but you have to have, what are your measurable, pieces for success? I want to grow this by 30%. I want to have 100 more clients. Whatever that is, you have to put a stake in the ground and claim that for yourself. So when you've reached it, when you're further off from that goal, okay, COVID hit and I have to recalibrate and figure out different ways to now reach that goal, which did happen to me. All my live events gone. How do I readjust and figure out how to meet those goals? But without that goal in the plan for yourself, you just have nothing to shoot for and you won't get there because there's nowhere to go. There's no end result. So you're like, I guess I did good. I don't know. I feel good. But staking that claim for each one of those buckets. I want this much growth. I want this many clients, whatever those three are for you. Set a really intentional goal that can keep you focused on whether you're succeeding or not succeeding on it.
And try not to set too huge goals, set reasonable goals so that you can see progress toward them. It doesn't have to be I want to grow my followers by 5,000. If it's 50 and those are all meaningful connections that you're really connected to, that's way more valuable.
I so agree, Emily. That's such a great point. Thank you for saying that. I am the least aggressive in my goals. No matter what I was I looked at last year's numbers and the year before. So I'd have a couple years of data to base it off of. And then I would do an incremental growth, which I could see we had 10% growth every year. Okay, this year I'm going to shoot for 12%. It wasn't a crazy number. I knew we could reach 10%. So let me have 2% more. And then of course my boss would be like, what about 50%? And I'm like, where are you getting that number from? And then it becomes a negotiation. But
if people want to nerd out on this, you can radically change your business by just changing things by 1%. So basically increasing by 1% on a regular basis, and also then looking at costs and decreasing costs by 1%, you end up with an exponential growth in your business. It's called the power of one. Look into it and nerd out on that, because it's we set these huge goals, but small goals are actually pretty powerful.
Yep.
So next steps. So these are just some ideas for how you can kind of, after you've gone through these questions, and we'll send out the deck and you'll have them in front of you, and maybe you'll walk through them by yourself or with your team. Other questions to ask. So Misty, you want to talk about this one quickly?
Yeah, who do you need on your team to make this happen? So once you've set your big vision and your goals, what gaps do you have on your team in order to achieve those goals? For me, because I just left the corporate environment and I'm on my own, it is not full-time people, but it is these part-time people that can fill in all those gaps. And then I have friends that need the same type of person on their team. So we are looking at hiring a full-time person amongst 3 of us. So you can share, you can get somebody, a contractor. There's so many different ways that you can fill in the gaps that just help alleviate the pressure off of it all having to be on your shoulders. So look at that. Even if you are in a company, asking for a contractor just to help on those small things to get it off your plate and achieve your goals is just life-changing for sure.
So that first part is kind of thinking around you. This one is thinking above you in both, either if you're in a corporation and you've got bosses and bosses of bosses, but also if you're a small business owner, you still have you might have a board of advisors. Maybe you're part of maybe you're part of EO or TAB or something like that, or you're part of a business group like Elevate if you're a woman entrepreneur. Is think of the people that have to like this idea in order for this to work. This is what one of our clients, Red Team Thinking, does with businesses. They teach them to red team or stress test their plans.
Yep.
And one of the things I like to do, I'm working on this, I wrote this manifesto on this little project I'm working on that's just personal, and I sent it off to a few people that I knew wouldn't like it because I was really curious about their feedback. And that's having the courage to go to someone that maybe you're intimidated by, maybe you don't necessarily need their approval from like a hierarchical standpoint, but getting their blessing on the idea is just going to make the plan a little bit more viscous in getting it executed.
Cool. All right. No, we're over, but we're just going to wrap it really quickly. If you're able to hang, great. If not, we will send out the recording. So lastly, what is your pace? And I think this is sort of like a theme. Justin and I have been kicking it back and forth, and Jen and Kat and I have been kicking this back and forth, is how are we going to pace this out? I think it's a great question. We tend to want to execute so quickly, especially after we put a plan all together, but it goes back to managing our time. As human beings, we're just from a research standpoint, we're terrible at estimating how much time things will take us. So what kind of a pace do we want to have along the way? I think one of the gifts of this very difficult time is that we've had to take a step back from our crazy pace. And now we get to redefine the pace that we want to have, whether that's returning to a workplace or scaling your business. It's a really relevant question and something that you can noodle on as you think about executing. So really, as we've gone through each of these 7 questions, they're illuminating these different areas of planning: vision, intention, purpose, customer journey, planning for challenges, simplifying, and measuring. And those are sort of the bigger themes that we're trying to inspire you to look at. Kat, before we close, are there any other quick comments or questions that we can tackle?
Let's see. Teresa just mentioned less stress, financial outcome, increased profits, higher level of happy clients, increased referral base. My pace is a smarter pace and less stress.
Yeah,
I love that. Happier clients is fun. It's an interesting thing to measure. That's something that we always kind of looked at when we were checking to see whether we were successful in our partnerships. But yeah, got to do some surveys out there.
Yep. Good point. Well, awesome. So thank you everyone for joining us. We wanted to give a shout out. I should have mentioned this earlier. Misty's company is the Theater of Marketing. She works with women leaders, as she talked about, to help them really convey who they are and just take their career trajectory to the next level through their public speaking and presenting. And so she's offering this download of 10 mistakes even seasoned presenters make. So you may think that's different than planning. You got to present your plan to somebody. And even if that's to you or to another trusted person, it might be to your spouse or to somebody else who's mentoring you. Yeah, right. Everybody. So this is going to be really valuable for you as you formulate the plan and then share it with people, because that's part of collaboration as well. Anything else to say about that, Misty?
No, I agree. Even your third party people that you're trying to build those awareness things, them understanding what your plan is, what your vision is all about how you're going to be communicating that effectively. Mm-hmm. And I just want to give a shout out to Emily and Justin. The fact that you are out here just sharing your knowledge and being so generous with your platform, you are amazing human beings. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you everyone that showed up. Like your comments and questions and everything throughout are just beautiful. Thank you for your missions out there.
Great. Thank you, Kat, for your support in this. Jen, if you're listening in too.
You got it. Hi, everybody.
So we love doing these. We're not going to do a Being Marketers webcast in December. You're going to hear some new news about what we're doing with Being Marketers. So our call to action is, if you're not a member of Being Marketers, please join. If you are a member of Being Marketers, please share it with other people and your peers. Being Marketers is designed for anyone that's responsible for marketing, and that's a human. So that's
no robots allowed right now.
No robots allowed. Yes, which is a lot of, if you wonder if the zombie apocalypse has already started, go look at marketing departments. So anyway, thank you all very much for your time and your attention, your care, and great questions and comments, and we'll see you down the road.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.